Hello and welcome to Press TV's debate. I'm Marzia Hashemi. Thanks so much for being with us. Libya, a country which has basically been in chaos since 2011 when NATO overthrew former ruler Muammar Gaddafi. Since then, regional countries and others have been vying for control. General Haftar has been fighting the UN-backed government, which he declared war upon. However, now we may be about to witness a lull in the conflict, as Egypt says Haftar is willing to participate in political negotiations. Is peace on the horizon for Libya? Stay with us as we take a look at this.
Libya's renegade General Khalifa Haftar ordered his troops in April last year to capture the capital Tripoli from the country's UN-recognized Government of National Accord, GNA. Forces loyal to Haftar, who supports a parallel administration based in the eastern city of Tobruk, managed to make major gains against GNA forces. But Turkey's military support to the GNA, that included troop deployments to Libya earlier this year, has turned the tide against Haftar's forces. This week, GNA troops took control of Tripoli International Airport and recaptured a number of strategic towns and cities, including Tarhuna. This city was Haftar's last stronghold in northwestern Libya and was used by his forces as the main launchpad against the capital. Repulsing a 14-month offensive against Tripoli, the army has also launched an operation to liberate cities such as Sirte, 450 kilometers east of the capital, which is the hometown of the country's former dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Haftar's forces have tried to put a brave face on their military setbacks.
Hearing appeals from the major powers and the United Nations for a ceasefire, we pulled back 60 kilometers from the greater Tripoli city limits.
On Saturday, Haftar also backed an Egyptian proposed ceasefire in Libya to take effect as of Monday after talks with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo. But the Tripoli-based government poured cold water on the proposal, which calls for the withdrawal of foreign troops from the country and demands that militias disband and hand over their weaponry to Haftar's forces.
We didn't start this war, but we will choose the time and place when it ends. Our forces continue to advance with force and resolve, chasing the fleeing Haftar militias.
It seems that the Tripoli-based administration only carries the name of the UN-backed government, since the international community has provided no strong support. But Haftar's forces have been backed by countries such as Egypt and UAE, and his forces have reportedly received supplies of French weapons. Turkey is the only country that has openly provided military support for the GNA and is trying to flex its geopolitical muscle in the region amid energy disputes in the East Mediterranean Sea. Ankara wants a significant say in transitional gas exploration and pipeline construction. Presently, there seems to be no end in sight to the conflict in oil-rich Libya, since it remains a regional proxy war following NATO's 2011 military intervention that plunged the country into turmoil.
I'd like to welcome my guest to the program, author and Middle East affairs expert Saeb Sha'ath out of Belfast, and journalist and commentator on international affairs James Tweedie out of Plymouth. Thank you both for being with us. Well, let's start this off in Belfast. Why do you think so many countries have gotten involved in the Libyan conflict in one way or another?
Okay, Turkey to start with. It's last Thursday, Erdogan revealed his intention, and he said it's the end of the oil trade for Haftar forces. That means Turkey wants to control the resources in Libya, the oil fields and the gas as well. It's want to control the exploration of gas and that in the Libyan's waters in the Mediterranean. And so it can compete with the rest of the oil discoveries in the East Mediterranean seas. And the other point, Turkey as well want to use the 1,200 kilometer shores of Libya over the Mediterranean as a card which can practice pressure on Europe. We can threat them with open migration influx of immigrants from Africa to Italy and to France and to the southern European countries. That's one card. As well, there is a 12,000 jihadi Takfiris, which the Libyan brought from Idleb in Syria to fight the battles along with the Turkish air forces and drones in the Libyan grounds, as we witnessed in Tripoli. So that what is the Europeans so much from any of these jihads will arrive to the shores of Europe. You have, as well, there is the conflict between Italy and France. Both of them, they wanted to control, historically, they wanted to control the resources of Libya. Some, Italy support the side of Tripoli, France support Haftar, and both worried as well about the immigration, but both want a bigger share in the Libyan gas and wealth and reconstructions.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, let me get James in on this discussion. James, I mean, we heard Saeb break it down a bit. I mean, is the main thing all this is about, in your perspective, control of Libya's natural resources? And I want to look at the importance of what is happening in Libya for the region and the world.
I think at some point Libya has to rebuild from the disaster of 2011. It was once the most prosperous country in Africa, and now it's that was destroyed in 2011, and now the country's in chaos. But so someone has to rule. What can I say about this? Yes, certainly Turkey is being very bold. My understanding is right now that the government of national accord forces are attacking the city of Sirte and have captured the airport outside the city. So they've moved very quickly. And I think, what can I say? I mean, it's natural in war that the fortunes of war swing back and forth, and it's natural now that, let's say that it's quite predictable that the National Salvation government in Tobruk is now ready to make a ceasefire and end negotiations when they weren't a few months ago. But of course, it could swing back the other way, couldn't it? Because, I mean, however fundamentalist or fanatic or devout these terrorists that Turkey has taken from Idlib, of the Nusra Front or the Turkish, Turkestan Islamic Party, and transplanted into Libya, they can't be in two places at once. I mean, if there's 12,000 of them, as my fellow guest says, fighting in Libya, then they're not in Idlib anymore. And, things could be complicated. Let's say it would be interesting if the Syrian government at this point were to start an offensive in Idlib again, now that, Turkey has withdrawn so many of its proxies from there. And other things can happen. I mean, also, the government of the National Salvation government in Tobruk is very close to the Egyptian border, to its ally. It has a natural land route. Turkey has to move its supplies and men across the Mediterranean. It's able to fly air support for the government of National Accord Army, but these things, it has to stretch. It has to reach out.
Okay. Okay, well, Saeb, your take on how has Libya affected these various regional entities and how they're dealing with the situation? I mean, we have Egypt, we have Turkey, we have the UAE. There's so many other regional players in all of this, and the effect with their support for these various groups and what it means actually for the region.
You see, Libya was the first country after the invasion of NATO-led forces in there and decimated the country to start exporting terror. They exported terrorists to the first country to export terrorists to Syria and to start the military conflict in Syria was the Libyan terrorist factions. This is what is Egypt. Here we can find where is the Egyptian come to the pictures or the Emiratis. Emiratis worried from the experience of Hizb al-Islah and what it done the Muslim Brotherhood in the Emirates. Egypt, the same thing. They support Haftar because they're aiming to protect their borders from the Turkish-supported Muslim Brotherhood or Takfiri groups. But Egypt now is engulfed in a bigger problem with Ethiopia. Egypt, the priority now is focusing its resources toward Ethiopia. So I don't think Egypt will be, because of the dam of Nahda, which is threatening the existence of Egypt. Thus, I don't think this why Egypt will send any military forces or anything. Maybe it will back Haftar little bit, but I don't think as well the Russians in here are interested anymore in backing Haftar, since he didn't unite Libya militarily under his own forces, with even Russian mercenaries they were in there supporting him. He failed, and that's why the Russians are trying to secure their interests. They don't care, the Russians, is Haftar or somebody else. They wanted to reconcile the Libyan forces together. They wanted a government to rule all over Libya. They don't want the Russians to see a failing state in Libya, and that's why they tried to do in Moscow's peace conference when Haftar just walked away. Russia didn't pressurize him to sit down because they are not interested in a person. They're interested in somebody in Libya to come to unite the country, because it's threatened their own interests. And that's why we witnessed when the Russian mercenaries were pulling out with Haftar forces from the Tripoli airport, the Turkish drones didn't attack them. And this can indicate there is kind of agreement now between the Tripoli government, the Russians and the Turkish. Russia can maintain its own interests. So the game is unbalanced in here. It goes all over the place.
James, how much responsibility do Western countries have for this chaos to begin with? I mean, and we go back to 2011, we know it was NATO allied countries that actually caused this chaos to begin with, because actually Libya was a very wealthy country and stable, no matter what we feel or not feel about Muammar Gaddafi. So how much of responsibility of all this chaos should Western countries be the blame for?
Well, of course, Marcia, they're entirely to blame for the situation since 2011, and you have to look at who these people are. I mean, Khalifa Haftar is, someone who was once part of the, he was a supporter of Gaddafi, during the revolution in 1969. But then he fell out with Gaddafi and he left the country. He lived in the USA for 20 years after they rescued him from captivity in Chad, when he was taken prisoner of war, apparently. And then he came back and was one of the leaders of the coup against the republic, and in the murder of Muammar Gaddafi. But then, in 2017 they fell out with him, didn't they? And they started, I don't know what happened exactly, but publicly they started accusing him of war crimes and crimes against humanity, as they always do to anyone who disobeys the US. So, then he, so then he turned to the Russians. Since then he's turned to the Russians and become friendly with the Russians. But then the government of national accord, is no more legitimate, because it was set up under the UN's auspices. But what interest does the UN have? This is the Western powers interfering in Libya. And trying to rescue the situation that they had created. But the GNA itself is a bit of a paper tiger. What's its organic support on the ground? Actually it's forces that were already running Tripoli and neighboring regions, and they had to rely on those people. So that's the real power there. And now, of course, it's become very obviously a proxy for Turkey. Faraj al-Sarraj has become, Prime Minister Faraj has become, a very obvious puppet of President Erdogan of Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO. So here we have, so the West was, both sides are creations of the West, and then they have the Islamic State, which many would say is also a creation of the West, operating there. And as Saeb mentioned, they may well end up allying with the Turkish-backed militant brought from Syria.
Well, Saeb, what do you see? Do you think that the GNA, the Government of National Accord, and Haftar, how do you think that these talks will go? I mean, because Haftar basically has been losing ground at this point in time. Your take on where these talks may go?
The problem is with Haftar. Haftar is, to me, he's a CIA man who was in 20 years stayed in America, was colluding with the Americans against Libya. And when he comes back, he claiming the leadership of the Libyan National Army. A lot of Libyans start to buy that, especially in the eastern part of Libya, which is dangerous to me. A guy who was in the payroll of the United States of America cannot lead a national army as he claimed, because at the end of the day, he will be serving some sort of imperialist agenda in there. But this is why it suits the Egyptian and suits the Emiratis, and it suits a lot of people to find somebody like that who knows the old regime, and he can at least recruit some people to try to get rid of the Takfiri groups, the Islamic groups, fanatic groups. This is what interests the Russians, this is what interests the Egyptians foremost. And the Turkish using Libya and using their war against Haftar to use it as a stick against Europe, as I said, in its geopolitical game of the pipelines and gas in the east of Mediterranean, or in any negotiation with Europe in the future, or it's in flexing its muscles, or in the Ottoman dream whatsoever. So many dreams for Erdogan. But Libya is, for Europe now, it's a failing state. The Europeans don't care about to fix it or not to fix it. They are caring about what their companies can have a slice of the Libyan cake in sort of the projects in Libya, reconstructions, and they want to see actually 3 entities in Libya, not just 2 even. They want to defragment it farther, and they wanted these entities within Libya. It can in the future it spills over to Algeria and destabilize Algeria. This is another target for the French, to destabilize Algeria using Libya. So there is so many agendas in there, and we don't know would the Russians and the Egyptians and the Emiratis and the French go back and support Haftar again, or would they try to compromise? You don't know. It's real warlords in Libya doing the game now.
Okay. Well, James, in your perspective, what has to happen? I mean, it's such chaos right now. Is there hope in bringing stability and peace back to Libya anytime soon? And if so, what needs to happen in your perspective for that to be a reality?
I think the attraction of Field Marshal Haftar to his allies was that he was an effective military leader, and it looked, until quite recently, looked like he was going to be able to settle the issue in Libya and bring the whole country under one government. And at that point, of course, other countries can start doing business with Libya, because you can't be when a country has 2 or 3 governments like Libya does. Who do you make deals with? Who do you sign treaties with, and so forth. So that's it. You talk about the lesser of 2 evils, and perhaps the National Salvation Government is the lesser of 2 evils, because the kind of forces that Turkey is bringing into the country right now are liable to, they're very unpredictable. They're religious sectarians. They're not, one has to fear perhaps for the black African population of Libya, who suffered greatly since 2011. And so on balance, I can understand why the Russians and the Egyptians, the secular Republic of Egypt, supported Haftar.
All right, Saeb, just 30 seconds. Your prognosis of all of this, what needs to happen? Are you optimistic at all that stability will be able to return to Libya anytime soon?
No. Turkey already have a military base now, which is the Tarabun, the military base beside the Tripoli airport. This is the Turkish interested in spreading more military bases. They have one military base in Qatar now, one in Somalia. They're trying to buy a military base in Sudan. So the Turkish aims are to spread their military wings and influence. And the military force, the Turkish military forces and air forces and drones are in Libya now. So we are worried in the future the backers will be sending their own forces. Maybe Russia in the future will send Russians if they don't agree with the Turkish. Maybe Egypt, if it settles the issue with Ethiopia, will send forces. You don't know. So it's all up in the air.
Up in the air. And with that note, I appreciate both of you being with me. Author and Middle East affairs expert Saeb Sha'ath Belfast and journalist and commentator on international affairs James Tweedie out of Plymouth. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you being with us on another debate. I'm Marcia Hashemi, signing off for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran. Hope to see you next time.